So why don't we get started? Ladies and gentlemen, I am Tom Bailey. I'm the current chair of the Economic Development Committee. This is actually our meeting tonight. Thank you for coming. And so we're now in session. And the usual is calling to order, review of emergency procedures, front and back door. I think everybody here knows how to get out of this building. And then the agenda, I assume for our committee members, there's no changes in the agenda. And then, we can take comments and questions, except that's what this whole meeting is really about. If anybody has any comments or questions not related to the agenda, seeing silence. Before we start, I wanted to alert you to our May meeting. In May, we will be looking at workforce in the area, and the concept of workforce, the housing that the workforce needs, and we will have two guests at this point. They are Kevin Chu, who probably you know. He produced this document, which is can be found online in the Vermont Futures website, and Evan Longfeld, who is not only on the Futures board, but he is also as we all know, a developer who's doing he will be addressing developer issues. So, without further ado, why don't we get started? And I will hand off to our committee member, who is Nicole Lebrecq, and she is part of the cell that's for South Burlington, has been dealing with CivicSol, and she will be addressing us and CivicSol off to the races. Nicole? I'm sorry.
Do you have an agenda that we can see? Not yours.
Don't worry, I have two. Okay. Can you hear me? We can't hear you. I can't hear Nicole. Nicole?
Nicole, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to do this through my phone and screen. Great. Well, I just wanted to say what a pleasure it's been to be part of this smaller group that's been working on the economic development strategic plan. Coming into this process, I had a periphery knowledge of what that might look like, but really looking at creating the roadmap for fostering economic growth, creating jobs, improving the overall prosperity, making South Burlington competitive in recruitment and funding and housing. But by doing so, this team has really stratified the strategies, goals, the actions that we need to achieve that desired future. And what that means is that becomes the work plan for this Economic Development Committee. And so, selfishly, and I'm so happy, it will set our agenda for the next several years of where we should be focused and what we can work on to really shape the economic future of South Burlington. And that's been so important to me as a business person in South Burlington and a resident. So, I know that Laura is going to take us through the steps and, how we work collectively to establish the vision and goals, and how much incredible outreach and really bringing people together to capture that vision and what our goals would be, how they're developing the strategy, what kind of policy direction is going to be recommended, but really walking us through the findings to date and also what the next steps are. Laura, did I capture that?
Beautifully said. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Can everybody, can the screen be seen for the audience that's in the room? I'm going to assume yes. All right. Well,
Yes, it can.
thank you. And Mr. Bailey, thank you for that kind intro. And Nicole, also thank you for devoting so much of your time to this process. As Nicole said, my name is Laura Huffman, and I am the CEO of CivicSol. I am joined this evening by Clara Belk, who is my colleague that has been helping with a lot of the data analysis that is a part of this engagement. So what I believe we would like to do this evening is walk you through sort of the deck that we've got prepared. It was in your backup. We shortened it a bit so that we wouldn't get too bogged down in data slides, but we will get through all of the main insights. And so the way this will happen this evening is we'll talk about our point of view. I think that's just exceptionally important in a community like South Burlington, and really how Jesse and Nicole and Alana and Paul and team really help shape this to be an economic development plan that is just uniquely South Burlington. And I think that's important. We'll talk a little bit about the framework, then we'll go straight into the findings and talk about the next steps of the engagement. I'll elaborate a little bit on what Nicole just said about how deep the engagement has been in the community. And then really what we want to do is get into a discussion with you, and we've got some questions for you to think about at the end of this slideshow. So here we go. One of the things that I just want to build off of at the beginning of this conversation is this idea of what economic development is and what it isn't traditionally. So if you think about economic development in its most traditional sense, it is typically measured in terms of numbers of jobs, income, and wealth creation. What we can tell you is that our experiences, this often leaves communities feeling as though economic development is happening to them, not with them. And so we have a very expanded view, and Jesse and Nicole and Alana and Paul fully embrace this as part of their conceptualization of what this engagement would look like. And that really is to think about economic development in a much broader way. In order for economic development to be meaningful for people in the community, it has to include things like human development, education, health and well-being, infrastructure, and quality of life. Yes, we're going to look at competitiveness. We're going to look at resilience. We're going to look at the long-term economic growth and prosperity. And if you let's go to the next slide. This will put it into a graphic for you. So a very traditional paradigm for economic development is what's on the left. And you'll see a lot of communities around the country that really organize their efforts around company attraction and job creation. It tends to be pretty one-dimensional in the sense that most efforts are focused on identifying companies that you want to recruit into your community. You may get leads from the state, you may get leads from site selectors, but staff is generally focused on who can we get into the community. And that will remain important for the South Burlington economic development strategy. However, our point of view about economic development, and I think you can't hardly pick up a newspaper or a magazine right now and not see that workforce is going to be front and center for the foreseeable future for all communities. And we believe that if you lead with building a vibrant workforce versus company attraction, you can get to a more interesting and a more positive place in communities. So we think about how can you put workforce front and center of an economic development strategy. We'll talk more about that. How do we think about innovation? You have a lot of innovation already happening in South Burlington. You have it at the company level. You've got some interesting companies that have just had amazing innovations over near the airport. But you've also got a lot of innovation with your small and your local businesses. We like to think about housing. I will tell you, housing comes up in every single economic development strategy that we work on, regardless of where it is in the country. Because if you are going to think about workforce, and if you are going to think about how you do economic development in service of your community, you will end up thinking about housing. Destination development. You all have some very interesting dynamics going on with destination development. I want to say two things about that. That's not just about getting people to come visit. You do get a lot of that. It is also about whether or not South Burlington is positioned as a community where people want to come live. And one of the things that has resonated throughout our conversations in the South Burlington community is there's just a real pride about being in South Burlington and being in Vermont in general. And then there's some specific aspects of living in Vermont that come through very, very strongly. And once you've done all that, then when you are thinking about attraction, that sort of traditional element of economic development, you're laser focused. You know exactly which economic development priorities you have. You know what kinds of companies you need to and want to add to the existing ecosystem in South Burlington. It's not just about throwing. It's not just about casting your net and seeing what you catch. It is much more strategic than that. So this newer paradigm is how we've initiated this work. Okay. So when you think about, I want to just do a little bit on this because we talked a second ago about competitive edge. So the work that is underway now, and we'll be presenting this publicly in the next stage of the work, really has to do with what are the key areas, or we call them clusters in economic development, areas of strength. In your community. And we think about everything around that cluster. So you might have primary employers, but you're also going to have support industries. You're going to have customers both within and beyond a community. You might have some specialized infrastructure needs. We are always going to be thinking about labor and workforce and whether or not your educational and training institutions are set up to build the workforce to maintain that strong economic sector and even to build it. International strategy. That is an active part of this community, and so we want to be thinking about how do we think about recruitment, retention in this cluster analysis such that we're taking that into account. And you're about to see in your demographics that you've got a pretty strong element in your community that is international. And then of course, suppliers. So when you think about a cluster, it's not just about the primary businesses. Think about it as an ecosystem. It's everything that makes that group of businesses successful. One of the things that we believe in strongly is in order for an economic development plan to be effective in our view, in order for it to be with a community and for a community, we believe the visible process is as important as the outcome. So one of the things I'd like to say this evening is this is actually pretty unusual. I can't think of very many times when we've had the opportunity to present to the totality of citizens that are volunteering their time on city boards. So this is, for me, this is a really terrific expression of how we're trying to include the community in these conversations. You all have made an exceptional commitment of your time and energy to this community. And so this is just one of many examples of how we're engaging in South Burlington to make sure that we are hearing all voices. So that gets to this list. One is own the effort. This is your plan. This is not about CivicSol coming in and overlaying a plan onto the community. The work that we do is extraordinarily customized to the people in the community and the circumstances that the community finds itself in, and we'll talk about some of that this evening. The other thing that we feel really strongly about is you want to start with a clear fact base, and that's what we're going to share with you this evening. We want to engage stakeholders thoughtfully and iteratively. This is not just about an initial conversation and then we'll come back with a final product. We iterate all the way through this process. We're doing this with Jesse and the team, but we're also doing this with stakeholders. So we'll come back over and over again as we develop insights and as we begin to develop a strategic framework. We'll be meeting with stakeholders all along the way to make sure that we haven't missed something. But also, we find that this is a really important way to get people enthusiastic and bought into the plan. And then a bold and clear ambition. I think, Nicole, you did a nice job of talking about that. I think that one of the things, a well-done economic development strategy is an expression of a community's ambition. And it's not just about businesses. It's about all of those things I talked about earlier. And so making sure that we are ambitious enough to meet the expectations of the community is a really important part of this. And then excellence and execution. I think probably many, if not most of you, have had the experience where there was a plan that you really liked and then you wondered whatever happened with it. One of the things that we feel very strongly about in our company is making sure that this is ambitious and practical enough with enough next steps so that the community can see that there is movement along the way. So this is not just a one-year plan, it's a multi-year plan. But as we design the implementation plan down the road, we will be thinking of those things that need to happen in the first year, in the second year, in the third year. And the idea is to build some accountability back to the community so that you can see how this plan is unfolding. All right. Framework. So what we're going to talk with you this evening about is what's called a benchmarking assessment. And so this is an opportunity to look at South Burlington as a function of your peers. So what you'll see on the left-hand side is a group of communities that we have been comparing your community to, and we're going to show you those results. For those of you that are listening and can't see the screen, I will read them. So Castle Rock, Colorado, Derry, Bend, Oregon, Hudson, Andover, Bernie, Texas, Portsmouth, Superior, Northampton, South Portland. So these are, as you can see from this list, these are communities that are close to you, and then there are some that are much further away, but are interesting peer communities for us to be looking at. In the slides that I'm about to go through, you'll always see these 10 peer cities, plus you'll see the county, the state of Vermont, and the United States overall. So you'll have several different ways of thinking about these data sets. You can think about how do we compare nationally, how do we compare as a state, how do we compare to our own county, and then how do we compare to these peer cities. And I promise you, this is not a data dump. These slides are organized into insights and findings. All right. So what I'm going to do now, this is going to have the same pattern to it. I'm going to talk up. There will be a slide that looks just like this. That is the finding, and then we're going to show you a couple of the data slides that sit behind that finding. South Burlington's population is growing rapidly. Interestingly, your household sizes are shrinking. So what we're going to be looking at here is that you are one of the fastest growing communities in Vermont, and your population growth rate is more than twice that of the county and the state overall. At the same time, household sizes are getting a little bit smaller, and that trend differentiates South Burlington from many of its peers. So families in the city are smaller than the U.S. average, which could have long-term implications for schools, housing demand, and workforce sustainability. So here's how to think about this slide. On the left-hand side, what you're going to see is the total population as of 2023. It's going to start with Andover and end with Bend, Oregon, and Andover being the smallest and Bend being the largest. And what you can see here is you're about number 4 with a population of 20,488. On the right-hand side, what you're looking at is the change in population as a percentage from 2018 to 2023. This is when it gets interesting. So you can see, for example, at the top of the chart that Derry has shrunk. It's losing population. You can see that the next few cities that we looked at are growing very, very slowly. The United States is growing at 2.9%. The state of Vermont is growing at 3.2%. The county at 4.2%. And then let's look at South Burlington. You're growing at 8%. So you can see that in this peer comparison, you're growing faster than the country, you're growing faster than the state, you're growing faster than the county, but you're also growing faster than most of your peers in this analysis. And then the other finding in this first one is that your families are smaller on average, particularly compared to the U.S. So one thing I want to point out is if you look at smallest to largest, it's 2.7 to 3.2. So just know that that's the range. And you sit at 2.8 tied with Andover. And you can tied with actually Andover, Portsmouth, South Portland, and the county and Bend. So there's a big clump of cities right in there as a comparison point that are right there at 2.8. But if you go look at the United States, which is second from the bottom, that's 3.2. So that's where the finding comes in. Smaller than the nation's average of household formation. Finding number two, South Burlington is becoming more diverse with a growing foreign population. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier. So the way that we think about this is South Burlington is less diverse than many of your peer communities, but your demographic shifts are reshaping the city. The population of people of color has grown 8 times faster than the regional average. Your share of foreign-born residents is higher than in many Vermont and New Hampshire peer cities, though still below the U.S. average. So this context matters, right? You also have a higher share of non-English speakers than the Vermont state average in many of its peer regions. So let's look at the data here. So if you look on the left-hand side, that's in green, what this is showing you is the share of foreign-born population in 2023. And you can see that South Burlington, Vermont is sitting right there at 11%. So if you see how you stack up, it's already a decent share compared to the cities that in your peer group, but also compared to the state, which is at 4%. The United States is at 14%. It's their second from the bottom. And then on the right-hand side, what you're looking at is citizenship status of the foreign-born population in 2023. So this is just another way of looking at that same data. So we're showing you here is the United States and South Burlington. On the top, you'll see that the United States breakdown is not a U.S. citizen, 48%, a natural U.S. citizen, 52%, and here in South Burlington, you're looking at naturalized U.S. citizens at 58% and non-U.S. citizens at 43%. Finding number three, South Burlington has high incomes, but there's always a however on these data sets. Gender and racial disparities do persist. So South Burlington residents earn significantly more than the national average, and income has outpaced national growth by 7%. That's a very significant finding. Median earnings are also 22% higher than the U.S. average. However, income disparities do remain a challenge. Men in South Burlington earn significantly more than women, reflecting a persistent gender wage gap that exists across peer communities. Additionally, Black residents face a poverty rate 3.5 times higher than the regional average. So if you look at these slides on the left-hand side, let me talk about the slide title. South Burlington's median household income is 24% higher than the U.S. median, and the growth is 7% higher than the national growth rate. So you can see where you stack up on median household income on the left. As of 2023, you were in the light blue bar at $97,000, $229. And if I want to just point out the state is second from the bottom at 78,000. So you can see how you stack up there. And then if you look at the growth rate of median household income over from 2018 to 2023, you can see how fast your median household income is growing. South Burlington has an incredibly educated workforce and a young population, more so than your peers. So you do have a highly skilled workforce, which is going to be a really important competitive advantage with more than twice the national share of residents holding a bachelor's degree or higher. Nearly 85% of residents have at least some college education, making it one of the most educated communities amongst its peers. And unlike a lot of small cities that are facing aging population challenges, South Burlington's population is getting younger, while most places in the United States are getting older. I will point out to you that this came as a surprise to a lot of people when we were doing our engagement work. You are the fountain of youth. So here's a slide that shows you how that looks in a pie chart. So I hope this is easy enough to read. But if you look at the blue side of this, what that's capturing is bachelor's degrees and graduate or professional degrees. The darker orange is showing you associate's degrees and some college degrees. The lightest and smallest piece of that pie is less than high school. So this is just giving you a visualization of just how educated your population is. South Burlington is more educated than peer regions, with more than two times the national share of people with a BA or higher. So this is looking at you stacking up against the peers, the United States, Vermont, and the county. So again, I will say this, that is a competitive advantage. You've actually got a lot of competitive advantages in our view. One is just the place, just the city itself, the natural beauty, its situation and all that. But when you lead with a workforce lens on economic development, this is a super strength for you. So South Burlington faces a lower pressure from an aging population than peer regions. If you look at that first chart on the left, the share of age 55 plus population in 2023 is 30%. It ranges, by the way, from 21% in Castle Rock, Colorado to 37% in Andover. And you can see that you're right in there with the United States as a percentage. The population changed. So from 2018 to 2023, what I'm showing you is what you've seen before. That's your 8% growth. This is showing you the population change over that period of time compared to your peers. So remember, Deary was the community that was losing population, and you're right up there in the top tier communities that are gaining population. If you look at this last chart on the far right, this is showing you population change, age 55 and up population from 2018 to 2023. So the reason you can't see anything next to the word South Burlington is because there's been no change. So what this is showing you in cities like Castle Rock and Bernie and Portsmouth and Andover is that their growth is coming a lot from an aging population. Just another way of looking at the data. And so here, in fact, South Burlington is getting younger as most places in the U.S. are getting older. This is why I called you the fountain of youth. So on the far left, what you'll see is the median age, which is 38.8. By the way, the United States median age is just 1 month below that at 38.7. But if you look at the state of Vermont, it's 43. So you are a young city in a state that is at the older end of this comparison. If you look at the middle chart, which you can see, this is the change in median age 2018 to 2023. That's the chart that shows you that this is a population that is growing. This is the chart that shows this is the data that supports the statement that you are in fact getting younger. And then if you look at the primate share of population as of 2023, this is the chart on the far right. You'll see that you are at 31%. So that's great. That means that you act that what this tells us as a team is that because you've got high education and because you are a younger and getting younger population and because your prime age share of the population is so big, this means that you are set up beautifully to lead with a workforce lens on economic development. And by the way, that's not always true. We work in communities whose biggest problem is that the biggest share of their community is older or retired individuals. And so what they have to figure out is how can they get young people to move to their community. This is a different set of findings altogether. Finding number five, South Burlington is adding jobs faster than people, yet some workers remain on the sidelines. So your job growth is outpacing your population growth, which that's that 8% number that we've been talking about, which is a really strong sign of economic expansion. I'm sure that doesn't come as a surprise to any of you in the room. Additionally, labor force participation has increased faster than the employment to population ratio. That's also a positive number. However, unemployment remains slightly higher than in peer regions. So let's look at the data. So on the left-hand side, you see the change in jobs from 2018 to 2023. You've seen a 10.8% change in jobs. Some of the communities that we compared you to, they're really fast growing communities. For example, Bend, Oregon, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Bend and the explosive growth that they have seen. Bernie is right outside of San Antonio, Texas, by the way. That's one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the country. So you can see how this is happening. Castle Rock is another example of that. On the right-hand side, what you're looking at is the population change from 2018 to 2023, and that's back to that 8% number that we've been talking about. Finding number six, affordability is a mixed picture. Rents are high, but overall cost of living is competitive. I will tell you, I don't think that we've done any form of engagement, whether it was a one-on-one interview with community leaders or a stakeholder group or a roundtable, where we didn't hear opinions and perspectives about affordability. And by the way, it comes up in every American city. People are just struggling with how to make sure that they are and remain affordable. So your housing market is a little bit nuanced. Home values are on par with benchmark peer regions, providing relative stability for homeowners. However, rent costs are significantly higher than expected. Despite these concerns, when adjusted for the cost of living in surrounding metro areas, South Burlington emerges as more competitive than many of its peers. So I'll walk you through the data that gets us to that conclusion. So on the left-hand side, what you're looking at is median home value as of 2023, which is $399,600. So lucky thing you're not in Andover because it's a whole lot more expensive there. And if you compare yourself to the county, you're slightly below the county. If you compare yourself to the country, you're above that. If you go on the right-hand side, that's median rent. And so here you can see that you're actually getting close to the high end of rent compared to your peer set, also compared to the county, also compared to the country. Cost of living. So this might take a little bit of time to think about. So adjusting for cost of living of surrounding MSA, South Burlington comes out ahead of most peer regions in the U.S. So on the left-hand side, what you were looking at is these peer cities and peer sets compared to the United States, which is at 100. So the way to think about that left-hand side is about 19.7% higher than the cost of living for the country. And you can see that the places that are below the cost of living for the national average is Bernie, Texas, and Superior, Wisconsin. So most of the communities we looked at are above. But interestingly, when you look at the cost of living that's adjusted, and what this does is this evaluates sort of the buying power in your community. What this is showing you at 45,476 the buying power within the community is strong, and this represents a competitive edge. Now, remember, these are averages. This does not mean this is everyone's experience in the community, but on average, this is a good sign that there's a good cost of living in South Burlington, and this can be a really important competitive edge when part of what you're trying to do strategically is get your students to stay and build careers and families in your community. This is a good sign that it's achievable. Finding number 7, commuting patterns have changed, but bike walk infrastructure is underutilized. So one of the things that I think is really neat about South Burlington, and there's just a ton of community pride, whether these are businesses or individuals, is the investments that South Burlington has made in its outdoor trail and bikeway system. There's a lot of pride around that. So I think, and that's a good thing. People see that as an asset. You have seen a shift in commuting patterns due to the rise of remote hybrid work, and we'll look at the numbers there. But unlike some urban areas where work from home trends have significantly reshaped mobility, the shift has been less pronounced. So just 3% of residents in South Burlington walk or bike to work, despite the city's compact size and accessibility. We've had lots of conversations about why that might be. Employment centers that are further away from these access points. There could be a number of reasons. It's still a point of pride, though. It's underutilized, but it is a point of pride, and it is used recreationally. So what you're looking at on the left is your commute times, and you can see here that your commute times are shorter than most of your peer regions at 18.9 minutes. So if by comparison, if you were living in Derry, it's a 30-minute commute, just over 30 minutes. If you look on the right-hand side, what that's telling us is the share of people who bike or walk to work. And so we're at 3% here in South Burlington. You can see that 3 to 6% is where most of these peer cities and comparisons are. At the high end is Northampton at 10%. So I would say you're not seeing huge numbers in any of these peer sets, but you are at the bottom end of it. Okay. So what I want to do now is switch gears a little bit, and that is the snapshot of what we call the benchmarking. Let me put this into context. So the way that this engagement was structured by Jesse and the team was they really wanted there to be a firm grounding in the data. So this is one piece of that. As I mentioned earlier, we are also doing analytics around your economic pillars or clusters to determine what your strong suits are and what your emerging suits are. We've done a pretty significant initial round of stakeholder engagement. We were in town and met with everything from small business groups to some of your key employers to the education community. We followed that up with a series of 20 or so individual interviews. We are about to launch what we would call sector conversations, which is diving into that ecosystem of sort of your strong suits in South Burlington. So, for example, healthcare, life sciences, aeronautics. Those are some of the sectors that we're going to be meeting with everybody that's involved in that sector in town. So what this graph is showing you is just sort of the range of people that we have been meeting with, and that we will continue meeting with throughout this engagement. And the next, right where it's bolded that says next, that's just noting that we're going to be talking in these roundtable discussions to get a little bit deeper dive on what the economic development advantages are and challenges are within specific economic sectors. So I know that was a lot to absorb, and we can pull up any slide you want to. But what we'd like to do, and the purpose of this evening's conversation, is really to listen. And we wanted to give you that backdrop of your benchmarking so that you had a set of facts in hand. But let me just show you some questions that we thought might tee up the conversation. So top line
Recording stopped.
we're interested in your perspective. We want to know what surprised you. We'd also love to hear what you hope to achieve with this economic development strategy for your community. Do you have thoughts on how we might measure future economic development success? Are there any non-starters? And is there anything else you would like for us to hear? So with that, Mr. Bailey, I will turn it back over to you, and we will listen.
And this is a listening session. The quality of what the outcome is going to be depends on what they get. They're here to get it from you tonight. So, anybody have any comments? Anybody want to address the questions that were presented? Alana? Speak into the microphone.
Thank you. Thanks. Steve Crowley. I'm a chair of the Energy Committee in town for a while. I had a question about some of the population numbers. Specifically, they focused on South Burlington, of course, but we're not isolated. And so the numbers for Chittenden County seem like hugely important in thinking about economic growth in South Burlington. I guess the other question I had while I have the mic is it would be really interesting, I don't know if you can, but it would be really interesting to probe into that younger population to figure out employment plans, hopes, status, where do people work? Are they largely unemployed? What's the status of that younger population? Those are my questions.
Laura?
And I'm going to, you bet. Clara's going to help me answer these. So I see a clap from Larry. Let me go with your last question first. Because you've got such a huge, significant share of your population that is working, that is an indication that your young people are not unemployed. Your working age population is employed. So that's one thing. Although I just want to agree with your point of view, which is one of the reasons you get started with this set of facts is then you get to ground test and ground truth it with your engagement. It's not going to change the facts, but it might give you some deeper insights of the why and the how. And I completely agree with you on the population numbers. That's why we always look at communities and then the counties that they're in and then the states that they're in, because you are correct. Context matters. What that 8% number is telling you is that people are, your growth rates are high because people want to be there, right? I mean, you live in a dynamic region and people got choices about where they live. And so people are choosing South Burlington. And frankly, that came through loud and clear with the engagement that we've done so far. It is interesting to me because on the one hand, people talk about what is South Burlington's identity. On the other hand, there is an awful lot of pride about living in South Burlington.
One more point on the regionalism front is that we're definitely looking at South Burlington in a regional ecosystem, and some of our other assessments, including looking at comparing South Burlington's economic development efforts to other places in the county, and the county at large kind of contextualizes it in that region, just like you've said.
Next.
Yes, Donna Laban. I'd like to ask about the third question, or make a comment about that. How do we measure future economic development success? A lot of time and energy has gone into developing a climate action plan, and I would try to measure future economic development success related to how well does it help us reach our climate action goals.
Really important point. The community's commitment to climate action resonates in every way that we've engaged with you so far. And so I agree with you. And by the way, that starts to influence what kind of business recruitment you want. Right. You want to be thinking about those clusters and those strategies that support sort of core values. And our read of it is, and we developed this understanding with the project team that we're working with. That is part of the core values of your community.
Want to go to Larry? Do you want to go to Larry on the screen?
Who's Larry? Go ahead.
Thank you. Very impressive data sets, and I appreciate being included in the open session that you're hosting. I didn't have any questions about your data. What I'm interested in knowing a little bit is how this effort will coordinate with other master planning efforts that are happening in the city. Particularly the rec department and natural resources, the open space and the parks and rec master planning. So I understand that, and I'm sure Jesse and Paul and other staff members have this in mind, but I just wanted to, stress to be aware of these other processes that are going on. And I think that there's some natural tension, to be honest with you, between some of them in terms of conservation versus growth and those kind of concepts. So it's more of a comment than a question, but one I'll be trying to hopefully be part of as this process goes on. So thank you again.
Thank you, Larry. One comment, and then I don't know if Alana or Jesse want to make a comment on the integration. Go ahead, Jesse. I see there.
So Larry, I think that's a great question. I think that's in a community like this where we do a lot of plans. We have a city plan. We are doing a lot of other master planning efforts along the way. That kind of coordination is always important. I guess, again, listening session, I'd be curious for you or anyone in the room, like what your specific, how you see those being in conflict right now, and how we as staff can work better to tie those things together. Now or offline is just fine as well. I know we have other hands up too.
Mike?
Just maybe a comment on that. Jesse, thanks. Nothing comes to mind right now, and I think that really will have to do with sort of results of any changes to land development regulations that come about because of any of these plans, particularly in light of recent discussions and decisions about not buying some conservation land, for example. So I think it's just a matter of having all of our committees keeping an eye on each other's progress and trying to react to things that may change a concentration or an action that we've depended on.
I guess I'll add one more statement to that and then give it over to Michael. And I know we have several planning commissioners in the room. I guess my position is I think we have a huge strategic advantage right now because of our recent round of LDR updates and being very intentional as a city of where we want to see growth and development and where we don't want to see growth and development, which sends a very clear message to our entrepreneurs and our business community about how to help realize the community's vision. I think we're leaning into that even more right now with the update to the form-based code to really make that code more aligned to those goals of densification where we want to see growth and conservation where we don't. So I hope those things are all aligned, but I think certainly something for us all to keep an eye on.
Right. Thank you.
Michael?
My name is Michael Mittag. What surprised me more than anything else was that South Burlington is getting younger. and that it's younger than many of its peer cities. What I hope this economic development strategy will achieve is a very strong balance between growth and the retention and expansion of open space, public open space, which is one of the reasons that South Burlington is such a desirable destination for people. And then I had a question, which was, what is the methodology that you used to identify stakeholders for engagement?
Jesse, do you want me to take that one? Okay. So the methodology that we used for stakeholders was, well, first of all, we met with the Economic Development Committee, so Mr. Bailey's committee, right off the bat. We worked with, so we've got a project team that is comprised of Jesse and Alana and Paul and Nicole. And part of how we put together this plan right at the very beginning is to identify stakeholders that we want to engage with in sort of our first on the ground experience with the community. So when we came in a couple of months ago, it gave us an opportunity to do a number of roundtables. So the team helped put together the invitation list. And as we move into, so it kind of goes from big and broad, and then we start getting more and more specific. The roundtables that we're going to be doing starting in the next couple of weeks are really centered around those economic pillars and the ecosystem that makes up that economic pillar. And then on the one-on-one interviews, we put that list together again with the staff project team.
So let's go to Ryan and then Lori and then.
Rather not get into the back and forth. We have until everybody's had a chance to comment. Go ahead, Ryan.
Ryan Doyle speaking. I think it was number 6. There was a slide using MSA data. That is the MSA. Is that Chittenden, Franklin, and Grand Isle County combined data? I don't know the slide number. Sorry, it was the item numbered number 6, or the page before number 7.
Where are you? Want to respond to that one?
Finding number 6. Great. If we go a little forward, MSA. Sorry, I might have used the wrong acronym. What is the MSA? Yeah, so the MSA area.
We're adjusting for each community within their cost of living based on MSA. So the cost of living was based on MSA, but adjusted based on MSA. So yes, those counties.
I think he was asking is what's the geographical limits of the MSA? What is an MSA? Metropolitan Statistical Area.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
So all of that.
Yeah. Your MSA includes Chittenden, Franklin, and Grand Isle counties.
So just to clarify that this is not like a South Burlington city specific figure, or has there been an adjustment calculation? And if so, can we see that?
The median income is city specific. The adjustment is based on the median MSA. We don't have that ready right now in terms of this slide deck. But maybe you can follow up and we can we'll
do that.
Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else? Lori, I didn't see his hand raised. Lori, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. I had a question and a comment. The question is relating to the growing younger population and the growth rate of 8%, which I think it was from 2018 to 2023. And my question about those statistics is how much are they influenced by COVID and sort of very period specific trends, and can we look at those as ongoing trends, or are they specific to the time period? And then the comment that I wanted to make was in relationship to our investment in bike infrastructure and the low commuting rate of 3%. But I also hope that we will see the investments in that trail system be an economic driver, both in terms of recreation and in terms of tourism. And I've seen other communities where those infrastructure have provided tremendous economic benefit. and would like to know how you're incorporating that in your thinking.
Okay. Let me make sure I understood your first question, Mr. Smith. So do you want us to do a year-by-year analysis and unpack that 8% to see what happened in each individual year?
No, I'm wondering whether that analysis gives us a effective picture of our overall trend, or whether it is because of the impacts of COVID and for lack of a better word, climate refugees and the work at home surge that happened during that period of time. Whether we look at that as a really solid picture of what's happening and where we're going, or whether it's just a blip in terms of the data.
I don't think it's a blip. And I don't, Claire, I don't know if you can get to it easily, but we actually, did we show the work from home? We may have.
I don't think it's in this deck.
It's not in this deck. Okay. If you look in, the short answer is this is one of the data points that we will recommend you track. It's a really important piece of information to go, and it's a rolling average. So you will get to if there was a blip, that blip will start smoothing out once that year drops off. That's one thing to say about that. Is part of what we will do is we will work with the team to make sure that we are developing a set of metrics that tells you that gives you the right feedback loop for the things that you want to pay attention to and the things that you're trying to impact, and understanding whether or not that population growth, whether or not you stay this fast or slow down, those are all things that we'll look at. In fact, I'm a big fan of dashboards because I think if you collect too much data, it ends up not being, nobody can digest it. We don't want to collect too little data, but towards the end of the work, we will be talking about how are we going to measure success. I think that's part of being accountable to a community, and I know that Jesse does too, is you all know the saying, what you measure is what you're going to end up caring about. The other thing, probably one of the things I want to say about your second comment, because several people have raised this, and I want to say to you all that across the board, the community wants to make sure that as you grow, so if you're going to be growing at a pretty quick clip as you are now, if you sustain that rate of growth. But even if you slow down, there's a real interest in making sure that you retain sort of the values that you all are associate with South Burlington. These are the reasons you either moved there or stayed there, and that includes a really strong eye towards climate action. That's a point of pride in the community. Investments in your bike trails and your hiking trails, and just the ability to enjoy the Vermont lifestyle. In fact, there was so much pride. I thought maybe Vermont and Texas have more in common than we know. But there is a lot of I mean pride in that really generous way. There's just a lot of esprit de corps around how you have invested in open spaces. What I did not detect was a sense that there were going to be false trade-offs between we're either going to have economic development or I did not detect a lot of this or that thinking. Just that the way that I think of that, because I've always lived in really fast-growing communities that value outdoor experiences and climate action and all of those things. How do we find ways for South Burlington to grow with grace, essentially, and retain those characteristics that you all feel so strongly about?
Just a quick follow-up on the bike and trail comment. I see those as potentially being a strong economic driver for our community, and I'm hoping that as you do the development of the plan, you look at the way other communities have used that infrastructure to drive economic development or economic growth within the community. So I just want to put that out there.
So we have a couple of other comments in the room that I'd love to get to in our last couple of minutes, Lisa.
Go ahead, Sandy. Oh, okay. Sandy needs to figure out how to run her phone. There we go.
So we're going to go, Lisa. Back and forth across the back of the room.
Lisa Yankowski, and I actually grew up here. I was born here, never left here. And this is kind of probably piggybacking on Mr. Smith's comments. So I'm kind of curious with the data you got. Of the employed residents, how many are actually working for companies here in Vermont in this area, or are they working remotely for companies out of state? Because I think economically that can make a big difference, because Mr. Smith was correct. We had a big influx of people coming here during the pandemic because we did things right. And I'm wondering if you're looking at the types of businesses that we're looking to develop, because having educated people is wonderful, but who are you going to get to fix the roads? Who are you going to get to do the jobs that a lot of people don't want to do and a lot of people with degrees aren't going to want to do? And that's a very important aspect, because I went back to work. I'm supposed to be retired because they can't find anybody to work, where I was for 31 years. So I think that's important to look at as well. And I'm wondering if your data reflects any of that, or if that's something that you're going to be looking at, and the type of businesses, because just like if you look at Route 7, how many convenience stores do you need within a mile area? There's just another one being built right now. And how many banks do you need within a mile area? How many different banks? So that might be interesting to look at as well.
Yes. I think the short answer to that is we will look at all of that. We've done a lot of work around specifically construction and skilled trades in other places. And what I will tell you is that for most of those jobs, some post-high school training is required to get into those jobs. So it's not, this isn't a question of all college, no college. There is some really interesting work that can be done around credentialing programs and even helping people to build career pathways in construction and trade jobs, because if we can get someone to come in and get that initial training and then start stacking credentials, then they can promote into crew leaders and supervisors faster. So the trick to all of that is, one, you're making a fair point, and we will look at all of that. Two, some post-high school training is needed in a lot of jobs. Not all jobs, but in a lot of jobs, the ones that you specifically mentioned, and building career pathways and giving people visibility and room to make career switches is all really important part of that workforce development pathway building.
Peter, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name's Peter Taylor. I've served on several committees in South Burlington over the years. We've reached out to the public for feedback and have had a very hard time getting that feedback from the public. I'm impressed that you talk so generally about the public's attitude toward the city. How'd you get that broad base feedback? Because the committees I've worked on, when we do surveys, when we hold meetings, we get fairly low turnouts. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'd like to hear if anybody agrees or not with me, but I think it's a very limited number of people that put input into the city. So I'd like to know your thoughts, particularly if you know of cities that are more successful in getting input, particularly with those young people that are here that probably are going to stay here, and get them involved early. Thank you.
Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, you had me thoughtful about that because this I think this is a dynamic that happens in a lot of different places. If it's a general meeting with a long agenda, a lot of times you don't get that many people to show up. I think probably the answer is that one, these lists were pretty carefully curated to make sure that we were asking people and helping and telling them what we were looking for, and that this is an opportunity for them to engage in a conversation and to help create and build an economic development strategy. So, I always like to say how you launch is how you land. And I think, even in these early engagement opportunities, we were careful to sort of help motivate people to want to participate because their perspective was so important. And I think if you're a small business, even small businesses now, in some cases, they had to cancel meetings a couple of times because they got busy. But they always rescheduled because they felt like they wanted to be a part of this planning effort.
Sandy? Laura, and then...
Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
Okay, I'm Sandy Dooley. I've lived here for more than 50 years. Anyway, I have 3 questions. One is Vermont is generally pretty well known as a high tax state. So I'm interested in, and I'm talking about the combination of federal, state, and local taxes, in particular property taxes. So what is the impact of the level of taxation on economic development, and have you looked at how we might compare with the peer cities? My second question relates to the fact that higher education is a very large component of the regional economy, and all of the people that attend these institutions of higher learning do not live on campus. A lot of them live in South Burlington. A lot live on my street. And I would like to know to what degree you looked at the impact of all of our college student residents on the percentage of young people that live here. The third question is, I'm sensitive to small data samples in places like South Burlington because we're small, and so and when you have small samples, you can have large ranges of error. So, what were the samples that you used for the population and the components of? What were the sources? And how many were old and how many were young, and et cetera. Thank you.
Claire,
all our population data is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the American Community Survey, which is done every year and then revised every 5 years for different projections. Census Bureau and the BLS provided those population points. We tried to use at the time the most recent years that were available across all of our peers, which was 2023. And the furthest back that we went was 5 years for a 5-year comparison, which was 2018. So there was not really any instances like small sample sizes because they have the tools to be doing pretty consistent survey outreach.
I'll try to tackle this issue of tax rate or overlapping tax rate. I don't believe we do have a comparison of peer cities. What I will tell you is in economic, just sort of like in standard economic development research, tax rates and regulatory environments and things like that used to sort of lead the conversation. I think this is a really important point. What we're seeing all over the country is availability of workforce and connections between economic developers and your local training community, whether that's your CTE programs in high school or your community colleges or your 4-year degree programs or your unions. What employers are looking for is to make sure that if they make a location decision, meaning they come to South Burlington, that they have adequate workforce. And that, by the way, was reinforced in our conversations with your local business community. If you are already in South Burlington or in any community in the United States and you are making a decision about how and where to grow your business, you are also thinking about workforce. So I would say that one interesting shift in economic development over the past years, and you can see this just in the demography of our country, is that workforce is going to be a more and more prominent and a more and more important part of the economic development recruiting conversation.
Nora?
Anyone else?
She didn't respond to the component of college students.
The other question Sandy asked was the impact of college students living here. Did you have a sense of that?
Is there a way to uncover how many of that young population is in college, out of college? Oh.
I think we would probably need to reverse engineer that and go to the institutions and ask them for residence data. So we can talk about whether that's viable in the next couple of weeks. I don't think we've done that to date.
Yeah, that was not a metric that we used to cross-check.
I'll just give you one little data point from a city that I'm familiar with, which is Austin, where I live, is that because there are, it's not just the University of Texas, there's a whole suite of private and public institutions in our community, and people refer to it as our fountain of youth. So it is, it is seen as an advantage in that because you've got educational institutions that is part of the draw, and people often want to stay in those communities after they receive their education. So it probably is somewhat of a driver, and I would say an advantage.
Who else? Nora, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Nora Senecal. I'm on the Housing Committee. So I have a question about looking at education and income distribution. Is there, when you're looking at communities and economic development strategies and benchmark communities, is there a balance or an optimal distribution amongst education levels and income levels that are good for community development and economic development?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that we're looking for a rule of thumb, as in your goal is whatever 40% college educated. A lot of that's going to tie to what is the economy in a community. There are certainly communities whose primary job growth is in areas where there is no college degree required, and maybe not even much more than a high school degree. In other words, not even a post-high school certification. So in some ways, the answer to that question is highly contingent on what businesses are in the community and how are they growing, and what businesses are you trying to attract to your community. So what I would say is that you all have a pretty sophisticated business environment in South Burlington. I will also tell you that workforce development came up across the board with the business community. So I'm not just generalizing or theorizing about the importance of workforce development. It was actually an issue, by the way, and housing that was raised pretty across the board with the business community.
Thank you.
Sir, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Keith Epstein. I wanted to address the second question about hope and the third question about measurement with a technique called the donut economics. Anybody heard of donut economics? It relates to this idea that there are certain things that we need to have a minimum of. So we all need a certain amount of food and we need shelter. If you fall below that, you fail. On the other end, there are things that we don't want to have too much of, like air pollution, water pollution. So it's about finding that middle zone in the donut. And I think that's a really useful metric for our economic development plan.
So we look for folks who maybe have not spoken yet before we go back around. I want to make an observation back to kind of Peter's question about public engagement in our community. So Laura asked a series of questions, and almost everyone has asked a question instead of made a statement. I think we can solicit we can garner what you're suggesting from your questions, but I think it's an interesting way we as South Burlington participate in community dialogue. It could be a sign of like we're very gentle with each other, so we want to couch things, or it could be a sign that we don't want to share what our opinions are. Something I'm going to think about in the weeks to come.
Well, they did present a lot of data, Jesse, and it did raise a lot of questions.
I'm not criticizing it, I'm just pointing it out.
I just wanted to remind our audience online that you are welcome to ask questions and you can raise your hand. I know in some venues it's turn on the camera, but if you raise your hand, then you'll pop up to the top of the screen and Tom can call on you or Laura can call on you.
Do we have a comment online? I'm not seeing any action.
About anything else they want to do.
Okay. I think Ryan raised his hand. And then Peter did after that.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of how we measure future economic development success, I think being able to pay for the kind of infrastructure and natural resources that we steward and have built, and also to improve both of those things, is something that we want to be able to afford going into the future, rather than spreading ourselves thin. And I also think of it in terms of the affordability factor. It's so common for places to do well economically and then price out people at the bottom. And I think we have already done that here to a large degree. And we see that with like how high rental prices are, or how difficult it is to get lower positions filled because people can't really afford to live close to where they work. So as a measure of success, seeing people be able to afford to live closer to where they work here, regardless of what economic bracket that is. One of the quotes I really like is that if you live in a 15-minute city, but your barista has to commute from outside of that 15-minute city, you actually live in a theme park. Because, you know, if it's only for the people who can afford it, and then the workers have to commute in because they can't afford to live nearby, that's a problem both for the sustainability of the community in terms of having community, and also the climate sustainability of people needing to come in from far away and the amount of resources that takes.
Okay, I'm seeing Nora raised her hand. Did you have a question? Did you want to comment, Peter, first? Yeah, go ahead.
Peter Taylor again. Transient populations, and by that I mean you have our population growing significantly. What percentage of that population stays here, let's say 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then moves on? And what impact does that have on a community if it has a low or a high percentage of turnover of its population, particularly the young population? Thank you.
Did you want to comment, Laura?
I think one way of thinking about that, I was trying to figure out who it was that was standing in the room. I think that when you've got a lot of higher ed, community colleges and higher ed, that is inherent in that, in the sense that not everybody that goes to those schools can stay there. And I will tell you that in communities that are struggling for workforce, usually one of their strategies is how do we retain more of these students. So I think it is. It is. I think of it as an advantage, but I'm pretty used to living in a higher ed town. In the sense that it brings a lot of innovation. It also brings a lot of research with your universities and things like that. I don't know. Claire, jump in here if you've got a different point of view to add to this. I definitely don't see that as a disadvantage. But let me give some more thought to that, because you also asked. What I heard you asking was, are there unintended consequences that we might want to be thinking about? And I want to give that some more thought. That's a really interesting question. So thank you.
Next is Nora, and then Mike.
Thank you. I'm just responding to what Jesse said about there's lots of questions and not more explicit. So I asked the question about balance, and so I'll be more explicit in what's behind that question. Because it's probably helpful, and it is kind of gets at what Ryan's point was, in that having an economic development strategy that includes people of all economic strata and that they can also live here, so that, because down the road, what could happen is just what he said of people being priced out of living here, and then that community ages out, right? Because all those folks stay, and then they become out of balance. So really having an economic development strategy that has some balance built in within it. And I'm not quite sure how to do that, but I just say having an ear out for that. How would you nurture that?
Yeah. I think that's a beautifully articulated sentiment. One thing that we found in our work is that you have to look at career pathways for all different kinds of careers, not just those careers that are in high tech or finance or some of the ones that you associate with 4-year plus degrees. So what do I mean by that? I'll come back to the skilled trades. One of the big shifts that we did in some recent work is to stop talking about these as just jobs and start talking about them as career pathways, and then really put some muscle behind that. In other words, what is the educational pathway that would make this a career pathway? So if I want to become an electrician, what is that first credentialing that I need to get on a job? And then what happens after that so that I can promote to a crew leader? And what happens after that to where I can continue to promote? And so I do think that part of the answer to your question is intentionality. You all probably cannot see the chat comments, but Nicole put a comment in the chat that said PC construction and ReArch construction are helping launch the Vermont Construction Academy on Monday, April 28th to help build our professional trade community. That's the language that I love so much about that, and encourage that industry to thrive in Vermont. That is the kind of effort that really does address your question, because what I hear that sits behind that is how do we honor all choices when it comes to career pathways, and not necessarily overemphasize sort of those pathways that people associate with higher education. And by the way, that can be tempting, because those if you go down that path, then that's going to lead you to certain kinds of recruitment efforts. And whoever said earlier, you are experiencing growth. That means that you're going to need the construction and skilled trades in your community. You're going to need them for your infrastructure. You're going to need them to build the houses. All of that's going to be really important. And giving those people as much access to career pathways as you would to someone that's going into aeronautics, I think is incredibly important.
Next, Mike Mittag.
Yeah, I'm down to anything else. Could we see the slide which shows all the pillars around which the strategy is developed? Getting there. I think it's further on.
Here we are. You just went past
direction. Yeah. No, the pillars. You described them as pillars. There's a whole slide of pillars. Well, without seeing it, but I think there are...
Michael, is this the slide you're talking about, or are you talking about the next one?
The next one.
Yeah, that's the cluster slide.
No, further along, there was a whole page of
Oh, he's talking about the engagement slide.
Oh, at the very end.
Yeah.
Nobody get dizzy.
That's the one. Icons, whatever you want to call them. I think you're missing something important there, which is climate action, unless I'm missing it. And related to climate action would be conservation and which both tie into quality of life, which is a very important one for everybody in this community. So climate action, conservation, and quality of life tied together. I think that's missing.
Can I address that one for a quick second? And Laura, of course, how do I get on camera? Ooh, here I am. I think, Michael, our intent as we built this constellation with the consultant was that climate action, conservation, inclusion, my word, not yours. What was the third word you used? Quality of life, thank you, is embedded in all of these. So across all of these domains, across business leaders, across entrepreneurs, across developers in our community, if they're not focused on those fundamental community goals, then we have a different challenge. So we actually didn't want to other those conversations. We wanted to embed those conversations right in the targeted conversations with all of these sectors. Exactly, core fundamental to all the things we do.
But before we, excuse me, Jesse, before we get, since people are already leaving, if just a second, Donna, if you want to make comments in more detail afterwards, this you can communicate with CivicSol with an email to Alana at iblanchard at the city website. So I plan to do that. Notice I've kept my mouth shut tonight. Please consider it. Go ahead, Donna.
In looking at the population growth and income level, I can't help but think that some of that's got to be related to the amount and type of housing that's been built over the last decade. South Burlington has some of the most expensive housing in the county. It tends to have a school district that attracts a lot of high-income people and people who are looking for certain types of school services that South Burlington provides. We don't provide much affordable housing here, or we haven't. I think we're currently developing more affordable housing, and I think, maybe that's starting to be reflected in the income statistics as well. But, I just think, and I'm on the Planning Commission, so I think about this a lot, as to how much are we really focusing on providing affordable family housing. And, but I think that the statistics for the income and ages and a lot of that, I think, is kind of determined by what's been built here. That was a comment, not a question.
Thank you.
We're at, okay, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, in the other things bracket, when is the last time that South Burlington considered a name change?
I think we should probably leave that one alone. It's 7:00, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Laura.